What makes a kidnapping the biggest? The ransom, the number taken, or the years of a life erased without a trace? Kidnapping breaks reality. Someone is here one moment, then gone, while the world keeps moving around their absence. The cases ahead aren't just shocking crimes, they're moments that changed laws, policing, and how societies react when a person disappears. Number 8. The Lindbergh baby case. In 1932, the abduction of an infant from the home of world-famous aviator Charles Lindbergh became one of the first kidnapping cases to dominate national consciousness. The crime unfolded under intense public scrutiny, with newspapers providing constant updates and speculation. For the first time, kidnapping was not treated as a private tragedy or a regional crime, but as a national emergency. What made this case historically significant was not only its brutality, but its aftermath. Public outrage pushed kidnapping into the center of political debate and helped redefine how law enforcement handled such crimes. It reshaped investigative priorities and influenced legislation, permanently changing how the United States treated kidnapping cases. The Lindbergh case demonstrated something that still holds true today: fame amplifies fear. When a crime touches a public figure, it can transform individual suffering into a national reckoning. Number 7. John Paul Getty III. In 1973, John Paul Getty III, a teenager from one of the wealthiest families on Earth, was kidnapped in Italy. The case captured global attention not just because of the ransom demand, but because it exposed a deeply uncomfortable reality: extreme wealth does not shield people from crime, it can make them targets. The drawn-out negotiations, public scrutiny, and eventual payment ignited an international debate that still hasn't been settled. Does paying ransom save lives, or does it guarantee more kidnappings in the future? There is no clean moral equation. Every choice carries risk, and this case forced those risks into the open. Often reduced to a billionaire nightmare, the story is better understood as a lesson in visibility. Fame magnifies exposure, and in a world that watches closely, anonymity may be the most valuable form of protection money can't buy. Number 6. Patty Hearst. In 1974, the kidnapping of a newspaper heiress by a radical group turned into one of the most confusing and controversial cases of the 20th century. What began as an abduction evolved into a global argument about coercion, psychological survival, and the limits of public understanding. This case became big because it refused to fit into simple categories. It challenged assumptions about victimhood, consent, and control, and it exposed how poorly society understands trauma under extreme pressure. The public did not just follow the story, they tried to rewrite it in a way that felt comfortable. The kidnapping did not end when the victim was found. Instead, it entered a second phase, one driven by judgment, debate, and moral certainty. Reality, as it often does, refused to conform. Number 5. Natascha Kampusch. Abducted in Austria as a child and held captive for more than 8 years, this case became one of the most disturbing examples of long-term imprisonment in modern history. Despite public attention and active searches, the victim remained hidden in plain sight. What made this case especially significant was how it exposed systemic blind spots. Kidnapping does not always look dramatic or cinematic. Sometimes it hides behind normal doors, ordinary routines, and familiar neighborhoods. Even intense searches can fail when investigators are not trained to recognize subtle forms of concealment. The case also forced the public to confront an uncomfortable reality: survival under captivity does not always look heroic or simple. Trauma reshapes behavior, choices, and memory. When stories like this surface, they reveal not just criminal cruelty, but institutional limitations. Number 4. Jaycee Dugard. Kidnapped as a child and held captive for nearly 2 decades, this case horrified the public not just because of its duration, but because of how avoidable it was. Oversight systems existed. Authorities had contact with the perpetrator multiple times. Warnings were logged, inspections were conducted, paperwork was filed, and still, nothing changed. The failure was not a single dramatic mistake, but a slow erosion of responsibility. Small lapses accumulated. Assumptions replaced verification. Over time, the abnormal became invisible. This case exposed a deeply uncomfortable truth: systems don't fail loudly. They fail quietly, through routine negligence. The lesson is brutally practical. Prevention is not just about better tools or more data, it is about accountability that persists, consistency that doesn't fade, and systems designed to expect human error rather than be undone by it. Number 3. Elizabeth Smart. Beginning in 2002, this kidnapping became one of the most closely followed cases in modern American history. For months, national attention stayed locked on the mystery: where she was, who took her, whether she was still alive. But what ultimately made the case historic was not just the rescue, but everything that followed. After being found, Elizabeth Smart publicly challenged long-standing assumptions about survival and recovery. Her advocacy helped reframe kidnapping not as a story that ends at rescue, but as one that continues through trauma, healing, and long-term psychological impact. The public slowly began to understand a difficult truth: being found does not automatically mean being restored. This case marked a turning point, pushing media, law enforcement, and policymakers to move away from sensationalism and toward survivor-centered perspectives that continue to shape how cases are discussed today. Number 2. The Ariel Castro kidnappings. In the early 2000s, 3 young women were abducted in Cleveland and held captive for years inside an ordinary residential home owned by Ariel Castro. Their eventual escape revealed a crime made even more disturbing by its setting. This was not a remote hideout or an abandoned building, it was a normal house on a normal street. Neighbors walked past it daily. Cars parked outside. Conversations happened on the sidewalk. Life continued uninterrupted. That familiarity made the crime harder to imagine and therefore easier to ignore. This case shattered the belief that danger is always visible or dramatic. It exposed how routine, noise, and assumption can hide extreme suffering in plain sight. Sometimes the most effective disguise is normalcy itself. Number 1. The Chibok schoolgirls. In April 2014, hundreds of schoolgirls were abducted from their school in Nigeria, triggering global outrage and sustained international attention. This was not a random act of violence, it was a calculated strategy carried out by Boko Haram. The mass kidnapping was designed to terrorize communities, destabilize the region, and exert psychological and political leverage. What makes this case one of the biggest in history is not just the scale, but the uncertainty that followed. Years passed with many girls still unaccounted for, leaving families trapped in permanent limbo. The trauma radiated outward, reshaping communities, national priorities, and global conversations about mass abduction. This case reveals one of the most brutal truths about kidnapping. Sometimes closure isn't delayed by chance or failure. Sometimes it is deliberately withheld, used as a weapon long after the crime itself. These stories aren't just history, they're warnings about how quickly life can fracture and how easily people can vanish in silence. Remembering them means staying aware, not afraid. For more real stories that go deeper than headlines, like and subscribe.